Day 487 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, and currently Russia is sitting on more than 224,000 military personnel losses. Then as for hardware, 6 tanks, 2 APVs, a whopping 19 artillery, and even 2 air defense systems. And of particular note here would be how yesterday's Russian coup d'etat attempts, what with the 7 Russian chopper losses on Russian soil or airspace, didn't actually end up showing on this Ukrainian Ministry of Defense list. And they may never be included here. So that's some food for thought as to how, in many ways, the figures you see here can be a conservative approach that's taken. And so let's move to the map and revisit the day that was yesterday for what could be described as a Wagner-flavored special military operation, led by Wagner boss Prigozhin to either take over the country or at least get himself and his PMC some long-lasting security guarantees, especially after the Russian MOD's previous threats of forcing disbandment of the PMC. And it looks like, at least so far, that Uncle Prigozhin and his mercenaries got some of those security guarantees. And how did that happen? Well, right as the Wagner forces managed to travel all the way up from southern Russia and reach in just 200 kilometers from the Kremlin itself, emergency last-minute negotiations were brokered between Wagner and Putin by Belarusian President Lukashenko, of all people. So crazy Uncle Luka, which is pretty embarrassing for Russia when you think about how and why another president from another country needs to intervene in a country's own internal affairs. And although it's not precisely clear on the agreement terms between Putin and his Russian MOD versus Prigozhin and his potentially 25,000 strong Wagner PMC forces, what we know for sure is that some kind of truce was called, thus many Wagner forces went back to their HQ in the Rostov Oblast in the south, and Prigozhin was seemingly safely exiled to Belarus. You see, just a few weeks earlier, the Russian MOD threatened to disband the Wagner PMC and absorb all of its forces under official Russian contracts instead, which of course would have backed Prigozhin into a corner without power, so something had to give, and Prigozhin had to try something drastic. So many internet citizens or netizens are calling Prigozhin pathetic and folding like Superman on laundry day in a failed coup attempt. But I would extend that rhetoric to say that it really feels like both sides in fact folded and gave in, accepting demands from one another, as the mere fact that the president of Russia had to negotiate with what is actually an illegal PMC formation in Russia just speaks volumes to how Putin had to give in to some of Prigozhin's demands, at least temporarily. So the reality is somewhat closer to both sides backing down. Oh, and that nervous and fearful look on Putin's face yesterday when he performed his televised national address to tell everybody not to support the Wagner PMC, it was just so priceless. So let's put that worrisome mug of Putin's in some more context, shall we? As we take a peek at the Russian army's rushed attempts to build defenses around the capital to protect from those Wagner forces. As here we have excavators destroying roads leading to the capital, affecting citizens' ability to travel to and fro and get on with their lives. But also, the Russian military decided to station or sit military vehicles on the highways with slashing their own military vehicles' tires in the hopes of preventing the Wagner forces from getting through, which is just sheer desperate and embarrassing attempts for the resource-stretched Russian military, who wastefully put almost everything they've got into Ukraine instead. But then we saw later those barricades of sorts didn't do too much good as Wagner just blasted their way through those such barriers. like it was nothing. So it wasn't exactly an effective defensive response from the remaining Russian military forces active in the region. And perhaps what's most funny or embarrassing for Russia, technically speaking, is how the largest captured city throughout this war has actually been the Russian city of Rostov, which the Wagner forces took in less than a day. So this is all quite the moment in Russian history that is going to be hard to live down, at least not without a bit of long-term stable and sound political change. The whole thing was just a real giant embarrassing slap in the face for Russia. And so moving back to Prigozhin, now he seems to be safe in Belarus with no legal repercussions for inciting what would normally be considered as an illegal armed uprising in the country. But still, having said that, Prigozhin isn't about to just waltz in onto the Kremlin for some of Putin's traditional homemade polonium tea. Though I would still expect some attempts on his life from the Kremlin at some point. And when all of this was happening yesterday, everybody got their bowls of popcorn ready, and not the least of which was, in fact, the famous Ukrainian drone commander, Magyar, watching the military coup in Russia while eating enormous amounts of salted popcorn. And so, out of all of this, I can only imagine Chinese President Xi and his thoughts on the matter, who is probably always, at least in theory, mulling over the potential options of a land grab into Russian territory. But now we'll head over to the Ukrainian map today, because while Prigozhin was marching through Russia, the AFU performed assaults causing Russian units to lose footholds on several axes of the front line, as the Ukrainian forces really started to smash their way past the Donbas Canal as they continued to force Russian retreats just south of Bakhmut at Kurdimivka. So right there, as you can see, going back and forth on the day, new liberations in space there. But also some extra liberation gains in the north there as well, near Kremova. But wait, there's more, as they also managed to force Russian units to retreat in North Robotyne. So that is on the Zaporizhia axis there. We'll zoom right in, just south of Orikhiv. So you can't see it very well here. In fact, there might be a little bit of an update, but it is certainly a case of not updated enough, this map, and the Ukrainian forces are in a fairly heavily contested area closer to Robotyne, almost in the center. Oh, meanwhile in Kherson, so the AFU seemed to waste no time taking advantage of the internal Russian disputes, let's say, shall we call them, by repositioning some forces to the occupied south bank of the Dnipro River, which may actually just be somewhat sparsely occupied by the Russian forces at the moment, as the Russian army has had to divert a whole bunch of their Kherson units to defend other positions in Zaporizhia from a couple of weeks ago against the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the region. And it's not just that sort of hearsay or a Ukrainian rumor, as on even in a Russian Telegram channel, which made some mention of this also. Some saying that, some Ukrainian elements had crossed the Dnipro, but also transferring 3 Ukrainian tanks with the use of a ferry to the south of the South Bank, which would be an incredible first for this region if that turns out to be true. So that will be need to be it for today, guys. No funnies per se in this video today, although I've just found the whole Russian military coup situation to be one embarrassing clusterfuck of a funny situation in and of itself. But what I also find personally funny is how Russian bots and trolls were noticeably absent from all over the internet yesterday during the events of the military coup as they were unfolding. Reason being is that the bots and trolls always have to go on an operational pause of sorts back at their troll farms during any big and unexpected and souring Russian military updates. as they waited for the situation to stabilize, and also as they waited for their handlers to tell them simply what next to say, which I couldn't even be bothered giving a platform to right now. So that'll be it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe. Thanks again for all of your support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.